The Transform panel provides easy access to the properties of a selected object. Using the Transform panel, you can accurately rotate, scale, skew, move, copy, and distort objects precisely. Let's take a look at how to do all of these things using the Transform panel. Now I'm beginning this video with the clover_single file already open on my machine, and the Transform panel can be accessed in two main locations. So to see this, I'm going to select this object using my selection tool. And you'll notice that up here in my control panel, we have the Transform link that shows up. And if you click on that, that's going to display the Transform panel that you can utilize to modify your objects. Now, what I'm going to do, however, is for this video, I'm going to go to the Window menu, and I'm going to come down here and choose Transform. And that's going to open up a floating Transform panel that's going to allow me to work without having to continue to go up here repetitively. Now I will say, however, that this Transform link up here in the control panel provides really quick access to features when you just need to modify something real quickly. Now with this Transform panel open, I'm also going to click on this double arrow next to the word Transform twice. And that's going to minimize and then expand to show all of the options available. So the first thing I want to point out is that in the upper left corner you have a reference point indicator. And this is basically the way that you tell the Transform panel what point to reference when you're applying a transformation. So for example, you have your X and Y coordinates. The numbers shown here are referencing the upper left-hand corner of the selected object. If I click on the center of the reference point, it shows me a totally different number relative to that reference point. So as a quick example, I know that this particular artboard is 10 inches by 10 inches. With the center reference point selected, I can set the X and Y coordinates to 5, and when I press return, it's going to move the object to the dead center of my artboard. In contrast, if I click on the upper left-hand corner and set the X and Y coordinates to 0, 0, it's going to move that object to that location of my artboard. So it's pretty powerful. Now in the same respect, you could change your width and height. And this button right here will constrain those values proportionately. So if I click that button to turn it on, I'm going to set my width to 2 inches. And if I press return on my keyboard to commit the change, it's going to scale that object in the width and height dimension, but the width, because I set it to 2, is going to be the implicit value, and the height is just going to proportionately change to whatever I want it to. Now this can be applied in a really interesting way. So for example, right now my X coordinate is 0 inches. What I'm going to do is in the X coordinate, I'm going to type 2.5. Now I'm not going to hit return yet, because if I hit return, it's going to move it to that location. Here's a tip. If you hold down the Option key on Mac or the Alt key on Windows and press return, it will apply that transformation, but also make a copy. And utilizing a well-known feature, which is Object Transform, Transform Again, or use the shortcut Command D on Mac or Control D on Windows, you can repeat that transformation if you wish. Now, what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to undo that operation. And what I'm going to do is select this second object. And if we want to, we can move it down as well. So actually what I'll do is shift click to select both of these objects. And in the Y coordinate, I'm going to type 2.75, hold down Option on Mac or Alt on Windows, press return. And that's going to make a duplicate in that direction as well. Now, in addition to just moving objects, we can select an object, and we can also rotate that object. And what we can also do, for example, let's move this out here. And what we could do is in the rotate field, again, it honors this reference point. So this time I'm going to click on the lower right corner, and for the rotate angle, let's type in 90, and I'll press Option return. And you can see that it rotated that object based on the lower right corner of that object. So it essentially just rotated it, kept this point consistent, and rotated it 90 degrees. In addition, you can skew objects. So if we type in an angle for skew, let's type in 20 degrees, you can see that it will distort that object as well. The other thing to remember is that within the transform panel, we have the scale, strokes, and effects option. So as an example, if I click on this object, you'll notice that in my stroke panel, the weight of the stroke is 3 points. However, if I scale this object up, let's reference the upper left, and let's make this 4 inches. You'll notice that in the stroke panel, it's still 3 points in size. Now what I'm going to do is undo that operation, and this time, before I do that, I'm going to turn on Scale, Strokes, and Effects. And once again, if I set the width to 4 inches and press Return, you'll notice that now it proportionately scaled the weight of the stroke based on the dimensions that I entered up here in the transform panel. So that's a really useful feature that you can turn on when you're working inside of the transform panel here. In addition, by default, Align to Pixel Grid is chosen, which is helpful for when outputting your artwork for the web. And last but not least, in the panel menu, you also have some really useful features that you can use as well, such as flipping this in the horizontal direction. I'll go ahead and undo that. You can flip it in the vertical direction, undo again. And then you also have some other options where you can transform only the pattern if it's filled with the pattern. By default, it's transforming both the pattern and the object itself. So you can see that with the transform panel, there's definitely more than meets the eye. Practice using the transform panel with your own artwork, and you're sure to make it an everyday tool in your arsenal.